Warning. This podcast may contain themes of eating disorders, depression, anxiety, mental health, and other sensitive topics. Viewer discretion is advised. Resources will be linked in the description box.
Hi, my name is Chelsea Garman. A fun fact about me is I'm getting married soon.
Hi, my name is Celia Kaiser. A fun fact about me is I'm going on a cruise this summer.
Hi, my name is Caroline Hardwick, and a fun fact about me is that I love true crime.
Oh.
I was like, I was just waiting.
Oh, she's dirty. Okay, so what is it? Do we say welcome?
We all say it.
Okay.
Ready?
Welcome to BondCon Talks Wellness. And this is our special guest for today's episode.
My name is Kayla Young. I am a nursing major here at Lindsay. I am a junior in the nursing program, and I am the senior intern for the Bonner Scholars Program. And a fun fact about me is that I'm double jointed in my shoulders.
I didn't know that. You learn something new every day?
Really?
Okay, so for this week's podcast, the topic is coping, and I feel like we haven't recorded a podcast in like a couple of weeks, so like I'm so excited to sit down with you all again and record. But like I said, this week's module is coping. So where are we going to start from there?
The definition of coping is defined as the thoughts and behaviors mobilized to manage internal and external stressful situations.
So lots of big words, obviously. To break that down, it's pretty much, if I can get my computer pulled up. Okay. So we mostly use coping skills when we're in a difficult situation or when we're very stressed out or something traumatic has happened in our life. We turn to different things to help us cope, and that's just to kind of reduce our stress levels, to kind of mellow us out, and to help us in a small time span. It doesn't prolong, it is not long-term helpful. Let me try that again. It's just for short term, but we continuously go back to it to help us.
So we typically use coping skills to help maintain difficult emotions, decrease stress, and establish a sense of internal order. An example could be like if you're failing an exam at school, a loved one has recently passed away, or you're starting a new and stressful environment. That could be college, it could be a new job, it could be anything. And you develop coping mechanisms to help you go through or work through these difficult times.
With the establish a sense of internal order, I feel like when we go through like difficult times, our head is just all kinds of jumbled up. We don't really know what's going on, and that coping skill that we use actually helps us get our thoughts back on track. And so that's why we continuously go back to that coping skill.
Charlesy, would you like to talk about maladaptive coping mechanisms?
Yeah. So, like they were talking about, like coping skills can be very helpful, especially like if you are in a really stressful situation. But there are also maladaptive coping mechanisms that can seem to help us like in the moment, but actually hurt us in the long term. So, just in case you don't know what maladaptive means, it just means not adjusting adequately to one's environment, which is the opposite of adaptive, which is when somebody can properly adjust in a healthy way to a situation. And with maladaptive coping mechanisms or maladaptive behavior, an action is taken by a particular individual that prevents them from being well adjusted to their surroundings. And so this is often an attempt to maybe reduce anxiety around a situation or a person, but in reality it's ineffective at doing so. It can actually increase in the long term. In humans, behaviors that are maladaptive will cause a person or a group to be poorly adjusted to their environment, and this causes harm to these people, and it's detrimental to their overall well-being. And the maladaptive behaviors can also just be bad habits that are developed at any point in a person's life, but they can often start after a major event, such as trauma, or maybe just something really unexpected that somebody needs something quick and easy to help make them feel better. And they're identified because they can cause emotional or physical damage to a person in the long term, even though it may cause like temporary relief.
I'm going to give an example maladaptive coping mechanism. I've talked about it before in some previous episodes, but when I first moved to college as a freshman, I was not used to taking full-time classes and having the workload and being in Bonner and also working a part-time job. So I had all of this stress just like building and building, and a coping mechanism that I came up with was I would not eat until all of my homework was done, because the amount of work that I thought I had was so overbearing. I would rather skip meals than not get my homework done, which is obviously not a healthy coping mechanism. So that is an example of what a maladaptive coping mechanism could be, because I was not adapting properly to my environment as a college freshman.
I also have like something very similar to that. I tend to go through these slumps every semester, and it always hits around the exact same time. We're close to the end. I'm just ready for school to be over with. And mine is I like to read instead of talking to people. And like that doesn't sound bad, but when you're bottling up all of your feelings and you're using your book as like an escape, so you don't have to communicate with people, I will lay in bed and I will sit there and read my book, because I find that helps me escape from this world, and it affects the people around me. My roommate thinks I'm upset with her all the time, and I know she does because she's talked to people about it, and it's not that. It's just my way of coping, and I know it's not healthy because I'm bottling everything up.
I like that you mentioned that, because like really coping mechanisms can be almost anything. I wouldn't have ever thought of like reading a book as like becoming one, but that is a really good point, because like you said, it can be an escape, and often like maladaptive coping mechanisms can be an escape for people from reality, whether it is something like reading a book or eating habits like controlling that, or even just like it's definitely could be a way that people can develop substance abuse disorders very quickly. Especially like it doesn't have to be like a super traumatic situation, just even like going into college is super stressful, and often people just need a way to escape, and that can easily happen.
And I think that with coping mechanisms, people don't realize that like you said, like reading a book, like the littlest tiniest things can turn into a coping strategy for you, and sometimes you don't even realize it. Like I didn't realize, until after I started working, through my stress and everything, that me skipping meals was me coping with the workload that I had as a college freshman. So I think sometimes, like internally, you don't realize these negative coping strategies that you have that naturally just over time build, and it turns into a habit.
Okay, so some of the impacts of basically maladaptive coping mechanisms. One of them that I could kind of put some insight on, I guess, would be like issues with substance abuse, since working in healthcare since I was 17? Yeah, around that age. I've seen a lot of people who come in and like majority of the time, not for all, I can't speak for all, but like a lot of the times they turn to drugs and alcohol and different unhealthy substances to cope with pain, whether that be physical or emotional, to cope with stress. I have family members who have partaken in some illegal substances to cope with anxiety and cope with stress, and being able to the point where it was, I can't get out of the bed unless this is the first thing that's on my list, and that eventually in the long run does not pose a healthy risk on you physically or mentally, and it poses danger to the people around you as well. So coping with substance abuse is a big thing that we see, especially in like our small communities and in the community of Columbia as well. Like it's with social media and with news outlets, you see it even more around the world, that it is something that you literally cannot avoid, no matter where you live or where you come from or who you know. There's typically someone in your life who is struggling with some type of substance abuse, and they're using it as a coping mechanism instead of being presented with healthy ways to cope, such as like therapy and stuff like that. They turn to the quickest and easiest and most
accessible.
Exactly.
Yeah, I like, as you were talking, I was like, yep, I was like, it's really sad in society, like in our community today, drugs are more accessible and sometimes cheaper than therapy.
Always cheaper.
Or doctor's
Absolutely.
appointment, it's just crazy.
And, most of the time, and this is what the sad side of it is, most of the time something has happened so bad in their life that's pushed them to it, and now they're kind of just, they depend on it. And we're so quick to judge people, oh, they're on drugs, they're an alcoholic, but we really don't know the story behind it. And maybe they've tried to get help, maybe they're trying, and they don't know the right ways. And that's the sad side of it is we look bad upon it, but in reality, they're just struggling as much as we are.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like with any bad coping mechanism that people have, like it can happen to anybody so quickly without you even realizing it. It's, the reality is that they're still human beings and that it's just what was accessible to them in the moment, and now it's maybe all they know how to get through each day.
I feel like even with like doctors and physicians and therapists and stuff, they're so quick to say, here's an anxiety medication, here's depression medication, here's pain meds, and then not even realizing that when people come to them for help, it could be a simple situation as to let me break it down and give you some type of cheaper, more accessible help, or making therapy more accessible and cheaper for people instead of the first line of defense being medication or something like that. Because at the end of the day, some of these people that get hooked on this stuff, like their days are so busy and so, filled with activities that they can't even take the time to go to therapy and stuff, so they just cop out with the easy way with just taking some kind of medication to either mellow out their, emotions or their pain for 6 to 12 hours a day, and then they get home late at night and it's like this pain is still here. It's not actually, the problem's not being fixed, it's just a blanket's being laid over top of it.
Also, I think another point to bring up, like with substance use, is like it affects your body, it affects your brain, but at the same time, so does prescription medication. It changes your brain. I'm not a nursing major, so I don't know what the correct term is, but like it does alter your brain. And I mean, like, I don't want to use the word addicted, but your brain relies on that medication. I mean, like, I, for one, I am on anxiety medication, and if I skip a dose, I'm having, what are they called? Like,
Anxiety attacks?
that, but brain zaps. So I mean, you have to kind of look at both sides, and I'm not comparing the two, because obviously using illegal drugs is worse, but at the same time, some people don't have access growing up to go to the doctor and get prescribed medication. Just at the end of the day, some people are more privileged than others and have more opportunities to get to
The right kind of help.
the right kind of help. Yeah.
And I really like how you hit on how it affects your body, because this is I've seen so many cases in the hospital of cirrhosis of the liver, and that's from alcohol most of the time. And majority of the cases that you see is because of alcoholism, and it kills you pretty much to where you're brain dead almost. Like, you can't move, you have all this fluid retained on you, your skin turns yellow, and it's so sad because I know that person who used it as a coping mechanism to get them to this point had a reason to, and that's the heartbreaking part. So yeah, it's very, very important that if you do have a coping skill, you need to make sure it's affecting your body in positive ways and not tearing it down, because those illegal drugs, those alcoholic beverages that you're drinking 24/7, those are just harming you even more, and it's not making anything better.
And everyone has a different story, has a different upbringing, has a different family. So everyone is going to develop different coping mechanisms, and I believe a person can have a healthy coping mechanism for one thing, and then at the same time have an unhealthy coping mechanism. It's just the way that they are brought up and their environment around them that kind of plays into their coping mechanisms. And I think that's something to kind of keep in mind as we talk throughout the podcast, and also just in your life, is that you never know what someone is going through and how it affects them. So the way that they cope with it is going to be different for absolutely everyone.
Okay, so in light of talking about, maladaptive coping mechanisms, we really wanted to touch on the fact that even if you are stuck in a situation where you may be using maladaptive coping mechanisms or feel like you're going down that path, it's definitely not the end-all be-all. There are ways to get help, ways to change your behaviors to be more positive. And we do have resources always listed in our notes and the document that we leave in our link. And maladaptive coping mechanisms can really lead to detrimental situations. They can really harm your mental health or your physical health, or even lead to things like suicide. And the links that we have, they touch on many things that relate to maladaptive coping mechanisms, whether it's alcoholism, whether it's maybe even being in an abusive relationship that you don't leave because maybe it's the way that you cope, or any other type of narcotics. Also with eating disorders, we have things for that, and then just suicide help in general. And touching on that, one of the most effective ways to fix maladaptive coping mechanisms and develop healthy ones is just to go to therapy. If it's accessible to you, it really is like the most helpful way to do it. Personally, I have had the privilege of going to therapy before, and something they really talk about a lot is like with maladaptive coping mechanisms, your brain has been wired to like go down this specific path over and over again because it's all it knows, it's all that you're doing. And then when you just make like a little movement to something healthy, something different, your brain starts to rewire, and eventually that old path will still be there, but you won't use it as much as you used to.
I think something important to keep in mind is that it's like, it takes time. Like these changes, you see people talk about like their recovery process, whether that be from addiction or, abusive relationships or whatever situation they're in. That stuff takes time. Like there's no timeline to say when you're supposed to be at that point to where you've recovered and you're okay and that you turn your life around. Like it takes baby steps, but like small changes made on the daily is what gets you to the big change at the end, to say that you've gone from this point to this point, and you can say that you've recovered and that you're, in a better light and in a better place.
You can't have a big change without those baby steps, the little changes, the nitty gritty, the nitpicking. That change does not happen without those small steps. And kind of bouncing off what Kayla and Charles said, like personally, I have also gone to therapy, but I was really nervous and scared to start. I hid it from my family because I didn't know what they were gonna think, and I feel like a lot of my problems were like internalized, and I felt like I couldn't go talk to anyone. And I just want to say that, like, I know I say this in almost every podcast episode, but I'm gonna repeat myself because it is really important, and it's what this entire podcast and the message behind it is about, is that if you are struggling with anything that we talk about, previous episodes and in future episodes or this episode, you can come to any one of us and we will help you. Like, I'm not calling myself a professional or anything, but any of us can help you get to the path to developing healthy coping mechanisms. Or if you just need someone to talk to, or just someone to be there for you, I promise you, any one of us sitting here will be that person for you. I just feel like that's really important to highlight, especially when talking about these tough topics, because you never know what someone is going through. And like, somebody could look at me and think, oh, she has everything like lined up for her, she's perfect. But no, like, I've had my fair share of anxiety, depression, and all that. So I just want to to give you all a reminder that you really truly do not know what anyone is going through, and not one person is perfect or has it better, because I promise you they do not.
And like Kayla said, it's important that you realize that there is a timeline to get you where you want to be, and it's okay for it to even scare you at the beginning, because it's going to be different. It's going to be something new, and you're not going to be used to it. So it might even cause you a little bit more anxiety than what you're expecting. But if you stick with it and you have people to help support you, you'll get there, and you'll realize that it's so much better than what you're used to, and you feel much better to have that support and to start a new healthy coping mechanism. It's just wonderful. It's a lot better than sticking to that old one that's just tearing you down even more and causing you more stress.
Yeah. And kind of bouncing off of that with like how y'all were talking about, a timeline, like definitely don't expect growing to develop healthier coping mechanisms or like having any type of recovery to be linear, because there's going to be ups and downs every day, every week, every month, every year. Like no matter how long you're working on it, you're always going to have periods of time where like you may be falling back, but then you'll have periods of time where you're doing really great, and like you can kind of see the light at the end of the tunnel. And it's just really important that like in those dark moments where like it feels like you shouldn't go forth anymore, like that's when the most growth is, and like if you can just push through, like there will always be that way out for sure.
Consistency
Yeah.
is key. Just stay consistent. You may fall and screw up, and it may be a week that you've gone back to whatever unhealthy coping mechanism you had, but as long as you recognize that this is a problem, this is something that I don't want to do for the rest of my life, and then make that step to change again. If you're starting your recovery journey over every week or every month or every year, it doesn't matter, because you're still actively trying to better yourself in some type of way. Just consistency is what's most important.
Learning through your mistakes creates progress. If the journey to recovery was linear, it was perfect, no one would have these struggles. So I always just kind of like to remind myself, like, there is room for mistakes, and mistakes create and evolve over time to create progress in the end goal. So I think that's just something to keep in mind. So the next topic is, what are some common coping strategies and styles? So there's 5. The first one is emotion-focused coping style. The second is problem-focused. Third, meaning-focused. 4th, social coping. This is support-seeking. And 5 is avoidance-focused coping style.
So with problem-focused coping style, let's say you studied hard for a quiz and you used flashcards to study, but you received a bad grade. And then you plan to study for the next exam using a different method, such as joining a class study group. This is helping you realize, hey, this didn't work for me. Let's try something new. And that's a healthy coping mechanism, because you're realizing, hey, this wasn't right. We're not going to go back to this because it's not going to help. So we're going to try a different way.
An example of social coping or support seeking is a young woman amid a complicated divorce seeks the advice of a close friend who has had a similar experience and may offer compassion. And that's one that's, I think, really accessible to use, like if you have people that you trust or are close with, just confiding in them with your issues, and like, especially if they have similar experiences, they can offer advice and kind of tell you like what helped them. And support can also just be a way to like help you keep going.
For emotion-focused coping styles, an example of this could be like, you receive a notification that they did not select you for the position to which you applied. You decide to take your journal to reflect on the experience and how you can better prepare for similar positions in the future. So instead of just, when things don't go your way, because we know life is not easy nor fair in any type of way, instead of letting your emotions get the best of you and like blowing up and causing a scene or, furthering issues in your life, you take time to sit back and reflect and, let your emotions settle and control what goes on the inside so that you can respond to it in a healthy way on the outside.
So, like I've said before, I'm a human services and counseling major, and a big thing that I'm currently learning right now, and my professors are all the time saying that it does seem silly, but it does help and show improvement in their clients, is having them have a small journal, and whenever they feel like, I guess, like an anxiety attack coming on, or they feel like intense emotions of anger, write in that journal, and it helps calm them down and kind of work through and develop healthy coping mechanisms. I feel like I say this every episode, but it's crazy. It's like what I'm learning in my classes then applies to what the podcast is. But like that emotion focused coping style, like that's not just something we made up. Like I have heard multiple professors say that that's what they use for their clients, is having a small journal to write in.
Going off of that, like with, if we're talking majors, like nursing is stressful, of course, but I know one big way for me to cope definitely is prayer, but like not only just praying, but writing it down, and like so I can see what it is that's I'm struggling with or what it is that I'm stressing about, and then coming back to it and saying, okay, here's how this prayer was answered, or here's how I got through that. This is like seeing it on paper sometimes makes it even easier to like push through and be able to focus on, the good things, and like, I've written this down, I've put it down, I'm going to leave it down and move on and focus on what is going good and what, I have to look forward to.
I really like that.
Yeah, I love that.
I really like that a lot.
It's a really good coping mechanism.
So our next topic is some common coping mechanisms that may challenge you. One that I really struggle with: lower your expectations. I feel like I have put myself to where there's so many goals that I need to reach in an impossible amount of time. And I tend to think that if I fail something, that I have to pick up more to kind of, balance that failure out. And that's not the case at all. Like, I have a very busy life. I work a full-time job. I work 36 hours a week. I am in a nursing program. I'm on the BLT for Bonner. I'm an RA. And I also help out with softball back in my hometown. So like I have a lot of things on my plate, and I expect myself to achieve all of that and more. And sometimes that's just not possible, especially with nursing. And I know we talk about nursing being difficult, but it really does take a toll on you. And I did not do as well as what I wanted to on my midterms, and it stressed me out. And so I had to come up with a different way to achieve what I was wanting to with nursing. And sometimes that requires you to drop something else that's on your plate to make more time for it. Because I look at it as nursing is my major. Nursing is what I'll be doing for the rest of my life. Yes, this other stuff is really good for me, but this is my main priority. This is why I'm attending college, and that's my main focus. And as much as it hurts you to have to drop something else, that is your number one priority. That's your main focus. And so it's important for you not to load yourself up to where you can't breathe, because I've done that before, and it's not fun, and it's not fair to yourself.
So we have a list of some common coping mechanisms. I'm going to read off a few that I think are really important. Ask others to help or assist you. Take responsibility for the situation. Maintain emotionally supportive relationships. And I think that these two are really important. Directly attempt to change the source of stress and distance yourself from the source of stress. Now, I think those two are the hardest to achieve and to do, and they do take time. We talked about it in a previous podcast about like setting up boundaries and how difficult setting boundaries for yourself is, but in the long run, it helps you. And it's the same with coping mechanisms. Attempting to change the source of stress is difficult, and it is a journey, but it does help you. And the same thing with distancing yourself. That could be a person, place, And that, I mean, it could be difficult. Like, you could lose a friendship over this. If a friendship's causing you stress, you could lose a significant other. But it is important to take care of yourself. And I just wanted to highlight those two because I feel like those two are the most important and the hardest for people to actually go through with.
I absolutely agree with that.
Absolutely.
Especially the distancing yourself, because sometimes, you know, when things aren't going right in your life, you got to do a little reality check and say, okay, what is keeping me from being where I want to be? And sometimes that's like the people closest to you, or the things that you enjoy doing, or like, you know, this can kind of relate to a maladaptive coping mechanism, like this thing in your life that you think brings you joy or is like some sort of self-care for yourself is really something that's keeping you from, you know, getting to where you want to go, or it's becoming a distraction in your life, such as like, you know, maybe you're doing too much on the weekends, or hanging out with, you know, the wrong crowd, or, you know, not saying that you're doing self-care and, you know, taking a break, but in all reality you're avoiding the fact that you need to study and focus and put more time into, you know, your classwork or whatever's going on. And I say this from a personal standpoint that, you know, when I came into college, I had horrible study habits, and like I would take it as okay, let me do this, let me look at this, and then I'm gonna take a break because, you know, I need this break. When in all reality, I wasn't putting enough effort into actually, you know, trying to find a better way to study, or find a better way to, you know, put my effort into my schoolwork. And that was starting to take a toll, and it was starting to show, and like, you know, it was catching up with me, and I had to do a reality check this past year and say, okay, these are the things that's going on in your life that are keeping you from being where you want to be, and they're becoming too much of a distraction to where you need to be. That was important.
Kind of bouncing off what you said. Distancing yourself from the source of stress could be anything. And like I've said before, it could be a person, it could be a place, it could be a specific thing. And I know that, like me personally, I'm a big people pleaser. I never want to hurt anyone's feelings. I hate confrontation. But I think that distancing yourself from your source of stress, and that is negatively, you know, bringing you down, I think it shows maturity. I think it shows bravery. So you kind of have to look at it from that point of view, and we talked about that, you know, talking about like barriers or boundaries. I'm like losing, yeah. But at the end of the day, if it helps you, just know that it came from a place of bravery, adversity. Just like something to keep in mind.
Absolutely. And I do like how you mentioned that, like, it's not just things that you do in your life, it can be people. Because those people that I have a tendency to keep people close to me that all they want to do is tear me down. But I'm like, we're best friends, we're so close to each other, and they're actually just continuously tearing me down. And I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, so I just let it happen. And that's not what should happen at all. You should distance yourself from that, because it does take a toll on you. It causes you to have insecurities, it causes you to have self-doubt, and that's not what you need to have. So, like she said, it's very important that if it is a person, to distance yourself from them, because you will realize just how much stress has been lifted off of you. Okay.
So just to end, we want to share with you all some stress-reducing activities that can help to improve your overall health, but also your approach to coping with stress. And some of these things you've probably heard before, but they're the most important. So getting good quality sleep, getting enough sleep, eating a well-balanced diet, exercise on a regular basis, whatever works best for you, whatever you enjoy the most, making sure to take brief periods during the day to relax, not just going all the time and burning yourself out. Even taking vacations away from home and work, just getting yourself into a relaxing or new environment. Engaging in pleasurable or fun activities every day, just finding things you like or hobbies. Practicing relaxation exercises like yoga, prayer, meditation, or even progressive muscle relaxation. and then avoid using use of caffeine, alcohol, or reducing your consumption.
That just called me out because anytime I get a headache, I'm like, let me drink a Dr.
Yeah.
Pepper.
Yeah.
I need caffeine. So that's one of my coping mechanisms for a headache.
I'm all for the taking vacations.
Yeah.
I'm all for a trip anytime.
Exactly. Yes.
Anytime.
If you're gonna take a vacation from work or home, let us know.
Literally,
We'll
we
go.
will. I'm ready right
Always down for a
Yeah.
trip.
Bags packed already.
Already. Absolutely.
Yeah, no, I feel like as college students, we tend to not realize that we need those brief periods to relax and kind of take that stress off of us because we're like study. And like Caroline was talking about earlier, like pushing back things that we need. When she said that she would do her homework before she would eat. Like, yeah, we tend to realize that we have those maladaptive coping mechanisms. I know I have one because I will refuse to go to sleep until I know that everything is done, until I know I've studied enough. And sometimes that's not until 4 o'clock in the morning and I have to be up in 2 hours. So yes, it's very, very important for you to realize what maladaptive coping mechanism you're using and trying to find a way to fix it. And like we said, it's okay if you fail, it's okay if it doesn't work out at the beginning, but as long as you keep getting back up and trying it over and over again, it's going to get easier and it's going to make you feel better and you're going to realize how bad you really want that.
Right, so I think that is the end of our podcast. I'm going to leave you all with the module challenge for this module. So we would like for you to examine some of the coping mechanisms that you utilize in your day-to-day life. Are there any coping mechanisms that are helpful to you? Are some of these mechanisms unhealthy? What can you do to better yourself and how to cope in healthy and positive ways? Challenge yourself to discover coping mechanisms that uplift you and help empower yourself. And like before, the module challenge and the journal prompts will be listed in the link with this episode. I want to say thank you to Kayla for joining us.
Thanks
We
for having
appreciate
me.
it.
And don't forget, our little slogan at the end is a happy person has a healthy mind.
Okay, are we all saying it together?
Yes. We'll clap. Okay, ready?
A happy person has a healthy mind. Bye.
Thank you.